The story began in a corner of the galaxy where power, money, and technology decided almost everything. Donovan Hale, one of the richest men in the human colonies, lived in a grand floating estate above a green planet called Arctura. He had built his empire with sharp deals, endless work, and machines that carried human influence to distant stars. People across worlds knew his name, but his fame was not only for his wealth. It was also for something far stranger: his children. Donovan was father to 6 twins, born through advanced genetic programs. From the very beginning, they were different. They were healthy, brilliant, and strong, but they shared one strange condition that no one could understand. The 6 twins never slept. Doctors, scientists, and alien healers from many systems had examined them. They scanned their brains, tested their bodies, and ran endless experiments. Nothing worked. The twins' minds never rested. Their eyes never closed for more than a blink, and their energy never shut down. At first, Donovan thought it was a blessing. He believed his children would always be awake, always learning, and always ahead of the rest of the world. But over time, he saw the cost. Without sleep, the twins grew restless. Their minds raced with ideas, but their hearts seemed empty. They argued often, grew impatient, and drifted into coldness that worried even Donovan. Their teachers said the children understood everything but felt nothing. They could memorize entire books in minutes, but they never laughed freely. Their faces were bright, but their spirits seemed lost. Donovan spared no expense. He hired top scientists from Earth, brought alien experts from distant planets, and even used rare medicines that cost more than starships. Still, nothing changed. The 6 children remained awake through every night, their voices echoing through the halls, their footsteps pacing in endless circles. People whispered that Donovan, for all his wealth, was powerless against the curse of sleepless heirs. In the shadow of this great mystery, another figure entered the story, a maid named Lyra. She was not human. She came from a poor alien race whose world had long been ignored and forgotten. Lyra had large, gentle eyes, hands used to hard work, and a quiet way of walking that made her easy to overlook. She was hired only because the Hale estate needed more workers. No one cared about her background. To most people in the household, she was just another servant, another unseen face in the grand corridors. Lyra had nothing in common with the brilliant scientists who came and went. She had no machines, no knowledge of advanced medicine, and no voice in the decisions of the household. But she had something else: patience and kindness. Her first days in the estate were filled with cleaning, carrying trays, and following orders. Yet soon she noticed the twins. They were always awake, sitting in corners with tired yet sharp eyes, whispering to each other in voices that sounded both clever and cold. She saw how the other workers feared them, calling them the sleepless ones under their breath. But Lyra did not fear them. She felt only sadness. One evening, while delivering food to the study, she found one of the twins sitting alone. His small hands held a book, but his eyes were empty. Instead of leaving quickly, Lyra paused. She softly asked, "Do you not feel tired?" The boy looked at her in surprise. No one ever asked the twins questions like that. Most people spoke to them only with respect, fear, or orders. But Lyra's voice was gentle. The boy shook his head. Lyra smiled faintly. "On my world," she whispered, "children would close their eyes to the songs of their mothers. We believed dreams carried the soul to peaceful places." The boy said nothing, but for the first time his eyes softened. The next day, another twin approached her in the garden. He asked about her home. She told him simple stories about long nights under quiet skies, about old songs that guided her people to rest. She spoke of the wind through trees and the hum of rivers that soothed restless minds. The children listened, not with excitement, but with an odd stillness, as if her words touched something deep inside them. Donovan noticed the change. He saw his children gathering around the poor maid, asking her questions, walking beside her when she worked. At first he was suspicious. "Why do they waste time with a servant?" he asked his chief advisor. "They have lessons, experiments, and studies." The advisor agreed, warning that the maid might distract them from their duties. But Donovan also saw something he had not seen in years. His children were calmer. Their eyes, though still sleepless, no longer burned with endless restlessness. They laughed once, an awkward, small sound, but laughter all the same. Donovan, though proud and cold, could not ignore it. He decided not to stop Lyra. The scientist scoffed. They said her presence meant nothing. It is coincidence, they declared. There is no science in alien songs or poor stories. But inside the estate something was shifting. The twins were still awake, but for the first time they were not alone. Lyra continued her work quietly. She never claimed to be important. She cleaned, carried, and followed orders as always. But whenever she passed the twins, she would share a word, a memory, or a song from her forgotten world. The children began to follow her in secret, leaving behind their endless books and experiments to sit at her side. They asked her why her people believed in dreams. They asked why songs mattered more than machines. And each time she answered simply, without pride. Because rest is not weakness, she told them. It is the strength that keeps life gentle. By the end of the first cycle, the mansion had changed. The sleepless twins were still awake through the night, but their pacing had slowed. Their voices no longer argued with sharp tones. They began to draw pictures of Lyra's stories, to hum her melodies under their breath. Donovan watched from a distance, both confused and curious. The mystery of the sleepless heirs remained unsolved. But for the first time there was hope. Not from the machines, not from the doctors, and not from the wealth of the empire. Hope had come from a poor alien maid, unnoticed by most but quietly changing everything. The days at the Hale estate began to change in small but important ways. Donovan Hale, though still doubtful, could not ignore the unusual calmness around his 6 sleepless children. For years he had lived in frustration, watching them pace the halls like restless shadows, never finding peace. But since Lyra, the poor alien maid, had begun sharing her soft stories and old songs, the mansion no longer felt the same. The twins, once sharp and impatient, now often gathered in quiet corners to draw, to hum, or to simply listen. They were still unable to close their eyes in rest, but their moods softened. They no longer argued over simple things or shouted orders at the staff. They asked questions, real questions about life, about planets they had never visited, about people who did not live in great floating palaces. Donovan noticed these changes but did not admit openly that they mattered. Lyra herself stayed humble. She never sought attention. When the other workers teased her for being too close to the children, she only smiled and said, "They are only children. They want someone to hear them." But in her heart she began to feel a sense of duty. She had seen in the twins' eyes a hunger for something deeper than machines or books. She remembered stories from her homeworld, stories of dream chords, old melodies that guided restless souls into calmness. Her people had used them for generations. But after humans came with their advanced science, such traditions were dismissed as superstition. One night, Lyra was cleaning near the study when she found the 6 children sitting together. Their faces were pale, and their eyes seemed even darker than usual. They had been awake for 3 nights without rest, and though they were used to such life, their bodies still showed signs of strain. One of the twins, the youngest, looked at her and whispered, "We want to feel what others feel when they close their eyes. Can you help us?" Lyra hesitated. She was not a healer. She was not a scientist. She was only a maid. But she remembered her grandmother's voice from long ago, telling her that songs could carry tired spirits into peace. She sat with the children and began to hum softly at first. The tune was simple, an old lullaby of her people. The twins listened. Their eyes did not close, but their shoulders lowered and their voices quieted. For the first time, they looked as if they wanted to surrender to silence. The next morning, Donovan's advisors reported strange news. The twins had not shouted or argued during the night. They had sat together quietly, listening to the alien maid's humming. The advisors laughed. "It is foolishness," they said. "Songs cannot replace science. The maid is filling their heads with nonsense," but Donovan was thoughtful. "Foolishness or not," he replied, "my children are calmer. That is more than you have achieved." The advisors grew angry. They warned him that allowing a poor alien maid to influence the heirs of the Hale Empire was dangerous. "Your rivals will mock you," they said. "They will call your empire weak if they hear your children listen to a servant's bedtime songs." Still, Donovan could not forget the small change he had seen in his children's eyes. Though proud and careful of his image, he chose not to stop Lyra. As days passed, Lyra continued her songs. She did not try to cure the children. She only gave them what her people once called paths to rest. She taught them gentle rhythms, asked them to breathe with her, and told them stories of rivers and skies. Slowly, something new began to happen. The twins started drawing pictures of places they had never seen, One drew tall trees that looked like those on Lyra's world. Another sketched a river that flowed into the stars. When Donovan saw these drawings, he asked where they came from. The children answered, "From inside our heads. We see them when Lyra sings." The scientists grew curious. They studied the children's brains again and discovered strange new patterns of activity. Their minds are entering states close to dreaming, one researcher admitted. But it is impossible. They do not sleep. Lyra did not argue with them. She only continued. Night after night she sang. The twins began to whisper of flashes of light they saw when they closed their eyes, though they never fully rested. They described visions of strange places, of people they had never met, of feelings they could not explain. One evening, Donovan confronted Lyra. He stood tall and proud in the grand hall, his voice heavy. "You are only a maid, yet you do what the greatest minds cannot. What is your secret?" Lyra bowed her head. "It is no secret, sir. It is only memory. My people once believed that songs could open doors inside the mind. Maybe your children's minds are searching for those doors." Donovan looked at her for a long moment. He wanted to dismiss her words as nonsense, yet his heart told him there was truth. He had built empires on logic and power, but here was a truth that came from a forgotten world, carried by a simple maid. The conflict grew sharper when news spread among his advisors. They demanded he remove Lyra. "If this continues," they warned, "your empire will look foolish." Imagine the news. The richest man in the colonies trusts a maid's lullabies more than science. Your enemies will use it against you. Donovan faced a choice. His pride urged him to listen to his advisors. His wealth, his empire, his reputation, all could suffer if he allowed this strange alien custom to continue. But his father's heart whispered another truth. For the first time in years, his children were calmer, gentler, even hopeful. He made his decision. He told his advisors, "Let her stay. Until you can do better, I will not remove the only person who gives my children peace." That night, Lyra sang again and the twins held each other's hands. Their eyes still did not close, but their breathing slowed, and their voices softened to silence. Something new was awakening inside them. It was not just rest. It was not just calm. It was the beginning of dreams, dreams that carried more than comfort. They carried secrets, visions, and a power that even Donovan had not imagined. The sleepless heirs were no longer only children of science. They were becoming something more, something that would soon shake the galaxy. And at the center of it all was the poor alien maid, whose forgotten songs had begun to change everything. The night of change came quietly. The Hale estate, floating above the green planet of Arctura, was filled with its usual hum of machines, its walls bright with the glow of artificial lights. But inside the children's chamber, something was different. Lyra, the poor alien maid, sat with the 6 twins around her. She sang softly, her voice weaving a rhythm older than any machine. The twins, who had never once closed their eyes in rest, began to feel something they had never known. Their breathing slowed, their hearts softened, and their restless eyes grew heavy. Lyra's song was not just sound. It was a key, opening doors inside their minds. Donovan Hale stood at the entrance, silent and watchful. For years he had seen countless doctors and scientists fail. He had spent fortunes to find a cure. Now he saw his children lean against each other, their eyes closing slowly, their faces peaceful. His chest tightened. He had not seen them like this since they were born. Minutes passed, then an hour. The house staff whispered outside the chamber, wondering if it was real. Could the sleepless heirs finally be resting? For the first time in their lives, the twins slept, and when they slept, they dreamed. The dreams were not small or ordinary. They were vivid and shared among all 6 of them. They saw galaxies stretching far beyond human reach. They saw rivers of light flowing between worlds. They saw humans standing with aliens, not as masters or rivals, but as partners, building futures together. They saw machines guided by compassion, not only by cold commands. When morning came, the twins awoke together. They did not rise in confusion. They did not panic as children who had lost time. Instead, they looked at each other with wide, bright eyes. For the first time, they spoke gently. "We dreamed," one said. "We dreamed together," added another. Donovan stepped forward, his voice shaking. "What did you see?" The children spoke of peace, of shared visions, of human strength that was not in power or wealth, but in unity and kindness. They described stars no one had mapped yet, ancient places filled with knowledge. Their words were simple, but the meaning was great. They spoke with a wisdom that seemed far beyond their years. The advisors were called at once. They rushed into the chamber, listening with disbelief. They tested the children's minds, scanning them again. The results left them speechless. The twins' brain activity now matched patterns known only in deep dream states. Impossible, they had once said. But now it was true. Some advisors grew fearful. "This is dangerous," they whispered. "If word spreads, people will believe the heirs are touched by alien magic. It could weaken our power, or worse, it could make them targets." Others were amazed. "This is a gift," they said. "These children are no longer bound by science alone. They hold something greater. They can lead humanity into a new age." Donovan listened, but his heart had already chosen. For years he had lived with pride and cold reason. But when he looked at his children now, rested, calm, and filled with strange wisdom, he saw a future he had never imagined. He turned to Lyra, the maid who had made this possible. "You," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion, "have done what no power, no science, no wealth could achieve. You gave my children rest. You gave them dreams. For that I owe you more than I can say." Lyra bowed her head. She was not seeking praise. "I only shared what my people remembered," she answered softly. "Dreams are not weakness. They are strength. They carry life forward." Donovan, for the first time in many years, felt humility. He had built his empire by believing humans were always the greatest, always above others. But here was truth. A forgotten alien song had changed his children's lives and perhaps the future of humanity itself. In the days that followed, the story spread quietly at first, then across colonies. The 6 twins of Donovan Hale had finally slept. Not because of machines, not because of medicine, but because of the old wisdom of a poor alien maid. Many mocked it at first, calling it a rumor. But when the children themselves spoke, calm, united, and wise, the mocking stopped. The twins began to share their dreams with leaders, scientists, and even alien councils. They spoke of new ways to build bridges between species. They spoke of guiding technology with compassion. They spoke of a galaxy where humans were not feared for their power, but respected for their ability to learn, adapt, and grow. People listened, not because they were the heirs of a rich empire, but because their words carried truth. Their sleepless curse had turned into a gift. They had become voices of hope, guiding others toward unity. And always at their side was Lyra. She did not take titles or riches. She continued to work quietly, offering her songs when the children needed them. To her, they were not heirs of empires. They were simply children who had needed rest, just as all living beings did. Donovan changed as well. He no longer dismissed the wisdom of others, no matter how small or humble they seemed. He treated his workers with greater respect, listened more, and walked with less pride. He had learned that true strength was not in building walls of wealth, but in opening doors of understanding. The galaxy began to see the Hale family differently. No longer were they only the rulers of wealth and machines. They became symbols of unity, proof that humanity's greatness was not just in science or empire, but in its ability to embrace forgotten truths and learn from others. The HFY spirit shone clearly. Humanity was special, not because it dominated, but because it could change, grow, and connect. The sleepless twins, once a mystery and a burden, became leaders of hope. And the poor alien maid, once unseen, became the quiet voice that had awakened a brighter future. In the stillness of one quiet night, as Lyra sang softly and the twins closed their eyes again, Donovan stood outside the chamber. For the first time, he smiled without force. His empire might one day fade, but what had begun in that room, the gift of dreams, would carry forward into the stars.